question.
About what we were talking about earlier is cops don't prevent crime. Their point is actually to be domestic terrorists. And I'm going to be very blunt with that concept. They are meant to terrorize you and give you the expectation that violence is always present. And we know that cops patrol impoverished neighborhoods, minority neighborhoods, black neighborhoods more than other materially rich neighborhoods.
Or even, honestly, even I, as somebody who grew up in poor white neighborhoods and trailer parks, they're not over there in the poor white neighborhoods patrolling like that either. Unless the city has deemed that area somewhere they want to do economic development, or they're about to gerrymander it. But there was not cops rolling through my trailer park with meth addicts across the street. They weren't trying to get the white people that I grew up with. Poor white people, they were all doing drugs and breaking the law just as much.
And so
you
the
know?
big point
but they're
that
not looking for it.
Yeah, the big point that I was driving to Joseph about this is that this is police brutality. We need to really assert this concept back into the conversation, because this isn't gun violence. This is police brutality. I don't want to hear just about the tool. I want to hear about the system that is enacting upon these neighborhoods. And so when we think about police brutality and the domestic terror that police offer for these people, we just need to be shifting away from these systems of hyper observation, because rich people, white people can literally have the worst, nastiest parties, hinting to the president, and apparently not go to jail for any of it. So we know that this is
They don't have
a bigoted system.
They're not putting gunshot detectors in their neighborhoods. They're not putting all these cameras and surveillance in those neighborhoods. You know.
Who's on the gang list again?
The what list?
The gang list.
The gang list.
Yes.
Yes.
So when we think again about whose name is being placed on these things, this is largely to make it so that minorities and brown folk cannot protect themselves. They are given these arbitrary, like drug felony type charges, and they will never ever be able to utilize a gun, even though their environments are impoverished and often hostile. So when we think about our constitutional rights, a lot of the way the system frames people inevitably annihilates them from their constitutional rights. Brown folks, black people deserve to be able to protect themselves and be able to specifically protect themselves against a hostile state. So, and that's always been a point of contention in the way that neoliberalism addresses gun violence. They think that we can rely on the police to protect us.
The Constitution.
Yeah, yet the police are not actually protecting us. They're terrorizing us and making us ascribe to laws that are necessarily prejudiced and bigoted. And this is even deeper to be spoken on the level of class warfare, because if you are poor, you do not have the same rights as a rich person. A lot of the issues when it comes to getting locked up into the criminal justice system is, do you have money for a lawyer? So in my instance, when the city of Wichita picked me up on fake charges, fortunately I had a pro bono lawyer giving me the attention. But there were 12 other people during 2020 that were intimidated into taking plea deals for crimes they didn't commit. And that is just one instance of one protest about, not to be spoken about the endless amount of statistical prosecution against minorities. So when we think about people getting locked up in there and bad procedures, because Wichita Police Department and the prosecution, I know of a few bad procedures that are coming up, it has to change. The premise has to get out of the idea of making money. So much of the not cops thing is to realize that we need to stop focusing on corporeal violence, fines, fees, and incarceration as a primary way of creating a healthy society. You are not going to be able to beat people up, put them in isolation, and throw them back on the streets and then say, do better. That's not how a healthy body is created.
And then the prosecutor, they took Michael Gonzalez, who does have a history of vandalism and breaking into places because of self-medicating, as you call it. He's 24 years old, and so it started when he was 19. He was still a kid to me. And that judge said that his lawyer had gotten him, I pointed to him, but she was really good and she cared. And she got him a bed at a treatment facility place that he couldn't leave. It wasn't like a come and go. Like, it was an inpatient treatment facility that was prepared to give him that bed for as long as he needed it. And he could have gone there for 2 years. But the judge said that because there was so much public interest in the case, that he couldn't do that because basically there'd be this outcry. He didn't say that. That's all he said. There was a public interest, too much public interest in the case to do that, and then he had to give him jail time. Now, he didn't give him the 65 months that the DAs wanted because they were trying to put a hate crime charge on there, and they easily proved that it wasn't. It was just a mental breakdown happened to be in front of a church. So it wasn't like an attack on the church. And they were able to get that part off of there. And so he was given like 30-something months, but with time served and good time, it's going to be like 2 years. Then they took him for a crime, a property crime, where he just cost the church money that ultimately was paid for by insurance except for $5,000. That's actually the only out-of-pocket money they had because he's been ordered to pay that definitely in restitution. And then they said they could come back if the insurance didn't cover everything. He cost $46,000 in damage to that church. I won't deny it. But he has now been placed in maximum security. And they didn't even put him, what is it, Larned? Is that where he's at? Or
Lansing.
Lansing. He's been put in maximum security in Lansing prison, or whatever it is up north there, with people that have murdered people, the worst of the worst. He does not need to be in a maximum security of anything. And so they've thrown him away to rot. Oh, and the judge also said that he obviously was having repeated problems, and that if the help, mental health wasn't offered to him, that he should have been responsible enough at 19, a poor guy, to a teen mom, the whole story. Like when I first talked to him, I was like, I don't even know your story because I know your story. The story you think, that's what it is. And so in a society that does not offer, in a state that does not offer him any sort of extended Medicaid, that does not have a lot of resources, that is a problem for me and my husband who have mental health issues to get the help we need with resources, with insurance. So the judge said that he should have somehow magically gotten the help that he needed. Also, when you're in the middle of a mental breakdown, you're not necessarily making the best decisions to get yourself the help, right? And so when he got arrested the first time, they should have offered him help. They had never once in the history of his criminal records, which is 5 years, never once did they offer him rehabilitation. Never once did they offer him drug treatment. Never once did they offer him any sort of assistance. All they did was give him a criminal charge and throw him in jail. Give him a criminal charge and throw him in jail. And then he was given a criminal charge and he was put in jail in Salina. And then he got into a fight because they wanted him to come and go into a gang, right? And he wouldn't. And for his protection, they stick him in solitary confinement for 2 months. Somebody they know has a schizophrenic diagnosis that has these mental health issues. So they stick him in solitary confinement for 2 whole months and then immediately release him from solitary to the streets. And we should all be angry about that. Because if he really is the kind of person they're painting him to be, they just put the whole community at risk by taking this completely unrehabilitated, mentally ill man and put him into the streets. And so they put him in a halfway house or whatever, but they never offered him any actual help they never attempted to rehabilitate him, not even in the slightest. And you take somebody who's been who's schizophrenic, who's been in solitary confinement for 2 months without proper mental health care or medication, and you just stick him in a halfway house, you just release him to the streets. And this incident with the church happened a week later. Even the most sane person would go crazy. And so it's like...
Putting people in a box is not going to save people.
Yeah, it was for his protection from the gangs. But even if they needed to do that, there should have been some sort of time period. You can't just take him from solitary and throw him out into the streets. And so this kid, something... I always say, this is my new little catchphrase, is it just didn't sit right with me. I knew he wasn't a satanic person. I looked at him and I could see a child. I could see he was 23 years old. And so I was like, and the news wasn't finding out and they weren't talking to him. No one talked to him about his side. And so I just went, and this is something any of you can do, just so you know. I just looked him up in Sedgwick County Jail and I got on his little list and I scheduled an interview. And when I started texting him, and it cost me money, I texted him and said, hey, I would love to talk to you and hear your side. And then I did a little video interview with him, and I got his side. And yeah, that's how I end up learning things, is because I'm like, what? I feel it right here.
Well, it's seeking primary sources. And so In a lot of my interactions on the internet, I utilize the colloquial term of fetish.
Yeah.
And I utilize this not in the sense of just a sexual taboo that is often associated. I use it in a way that identifies when somebody is speaking of something about something else that is not necessarily true. So I always tell people, you need to get it straight from the horse's mouth. So whether or not you believe somebody, and this could be even for trans identity, people fetishize trans identity way too much instead of just coming to the person and accepting the reality that person is living. Because whether or not I can perceive or empathize or understand is not my position. The position that I need to accept is somebody else's expression and realization.
Yeah.
And that is to be said about a lot of things. Because people are projecting, they have their insecurities, they have their life experiences.
They have their fear.
They have their fears, and they want their comforts. They want to be able to sleep well at night.
And they're like, okay, I think, and I had these same arguments against no cops things. And it was like, I don't know his real last name. He goes by like Abraham, not Abraham. And I knew his sister, Teresa, and stuff. And so him and his mother, right? And it was at a protest against Lily Wu that I said, and I've had people like you try to explain these things to me. And I'm like, it's like somebody trying to explain football. I'm just like, oh, what? And so I asked if he was willing to take my questions and not get upset with me that I didn't know the answers already. And he explained to me, I was like, so what do we do about this situation? He's like, social workers. And what do we do about this situation? He's social workers. What do we do about this situation? Therapist. You know what I mean? And so he was able to make me understand that there are other options to be handled with these situations. And he was able to say it to me in a way that I finally like clicked in my head. And that's what I'm trying to do now is just to get people that are already coming over there and just get it to fully. And as we've seen with the federal government in Wichita, white people and these people that think they're safe, they will come after you. And I almost, you know what? I almost hope my research ends up showing it that it's more white people that get killed by the police in Wichita, because then maybe I can get you guys to care.
It is affecting you.
Yeah.
And it's affecting humanity.
If they can do it to him, they can do it to you. They didn't necessarily know what his race was on the other side of that door. They killed him 5 seconds later. So if they can do that to Brian Hill's son, they can do it to my son that's white. And so I recognize that. I see my son. I see we definitely have an empathy problem. We have a serious empathy problem.
That is derived by the possessive individualism of a society. A lot of our old collectivisms have been broken down for each of us to start our own new nuclear family. And so when we think about the structuring of the self, much of it is about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and creating your own self-reliance. And if you're not able to do that, it is a personal moral failure, and in many cases, God doesn't love you as much. And that sounds snarky, but there is plenty of religious philosophy that is validating the exploitations of capitalism through religious righteousness. And that's where I have such a huge problem about the way a lot of our forms of charity are being operated, is because it is through moral righteousness that is only a product of hierarchy. And that is a big thing that isn't being addressed within these structures, is at what point is money facilitating the hierarchy of care?
Honestly, as someone who's been involved with nonprofits and had tried to start nonprofits over the years, they have taken away any incentive I have to do a nonprofit situation, because it used to be you wanted that nonprofit to get people to donate money to you because then they could have a tax write-off, and you get money from people that don't necessarily care, but they're gonna give you a tax write-off. So because I've also been a CPA, and I didn't make money with any of that education. I made money being a CPA, or not a CPA, but working with CPAs and being an accountant. So back when I first started, before they changed the rules, and I'm pretty sure it was Trump that did it, before they changed the rules on how it could be done, there were people that would come and they would have us do their books through November and get them all cleaned up, and then tell them, and then they would choose in the month of December to donate $10,000 or whatever it was, right? Because by donating that $10,000, it dropped them down to where they were gonna have to pay that $10,000 anyway, if not more.
Still, it's a tax bracket.
And so they're able to pay that $10,000, and it takes them down a bracket, or it takes them down, and they get that off. And then they actually, by going down a whole other bracket, save way more than $10,000. And
Charity is tax evasion.
And they have taken, yeah, and then they set up their own charities and then donate to it and all sorts of things. And so I think, and now they've changed the rules on how that can be done. And so rich people aren't doing that anymore. So nonprofits and all these things that are so reliant on money, really the only way you can now do it is through grants, right? And then there's still just, the grant writing process is hard, it's difficult. I did write a grant proposal for things. And then it's still just all this, especially when you talk about the local level, there's still just, they're giving out that grant money to still perpetuate whatever it is, whatever narrative or image they want of the city it is. So the person that ended up getting the grant was about, their theme in the back of their mind was about aviation. So they got the money, even though my program was so much better, could help so much more people with so much less money.
And again, that goes back into the narrative craft. And again, why my position and premise of a not cops concept is actually a real counterposition to the current operations of how our government is ran. If we don't start imagining what validates everything, and what validates everything is violence. So as I mentioned earlier, I have an understanding that money is fake and property is theft. We live in a world full of stolen goods that has been validated through the procession of litigation of terrible human beings. So when it comes to understanding what the dollar is, people often accuse it of being a fiat that has an imaginary attachment, but the thing that maintains the US dollar's value is violence. Violence and the guaranteed violence in the moving of goods, properties, and services. So without the violence, there is no capitalism. There is no markets. There is no nothing.
And when you say violence, I mean, I understand what you mean, but
Yeah.
when you say violence, you're not just talking about somebody shooting you or physical violence, but
So I am though, and
Yeah.
when we think about
there's a lot of things that are violence that aren't.
Yeah. So
Violence.
my work is geared towards global class consciousness. We're going to bring it there. So the state thing is the current campaign that I'm working on. But if we don't have a recognition of the global consequences of our economy, we will continue to ignore, again, that fundamental premise of how we acquire everything. So if you go overseas to any number of colonized countries, all these proxy states, these pseudo countries that are ran by corrupt people, the amount of murder and genocide around the world is mind-boggling. We're seeing it in live action in Gaza, Congo, and all these places. So without the guarantee of violence, we can no longer acquire goods globally. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing that validates the acquisition of any property in the United States. If there is nobody there to forcibly tell you this is somebody's, it doesn't exist anymore. Everything is owned by the enforcement of text, of documents. And the only thing that guarantees the realism of these documents is whether or not there is an officer that can come and mediate the occupation of that property. Mm-hmm. So that is why we need to be switching the premise and the way we even realize the economy is that we need to be realizing if our economy is based off of violence, then there is no moral consumption within capitalism. So we are all forced to participate in this system. But if you are not advocating for human rights and the reduction of violence, you are just lying to people. You are hurting people for your boon. Mm-hmm. So how much pleasure are we acquiring at the expense of other people's suffering? And that's why there's so much silence about DeAndre, is because the violence that is executed against the bodies of the community in general is not substantial enough to stop the economy. If they were to make this commentary about the violence that is being perpetuated in the streets, then it would bring a question into the legitimacy of the violence that guarantees the access to bodies and property.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, like we're talking about, they're scared, right? Yeah. They see this and they want to tell themselves that DeAndre Hill was a bad man. They want to tell themselves that he was not good. Oh, am I over? We just did it. Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
We got to finish. But they want to tell themselves, while I break down, they want to tell themselves that it can't happen to their side. It's not going to happen to them because he was a bad guy. And he's not.
Yep.